Julian is a Mermaid by Jessica Love, and I noticed she wrote this for her Nana. It says, this is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela, and those are some mermaids. Does anybody know by abuela? What does that mean in Spanish? Go ahead. Grandma? Yeah. So she wrote this for her Nana, and it seems to be about a little boy and his abuela. It says here, Julian loves mermaids. And here he is. They were sitting on the subway, and I guess Julian's getting really lost in the idea of his book and mermaids, and he's kind of under the sea now in his imagination as he's riding on the subway. Now he's swimming with the fish. Right? And now he has grown a tail. He is becoming a mermaid. And there's a great big, very unique fish.
I think that's going to be a detail.
Yeah, and this very unique fish is bringing Julian a very nice necklace under the sea. And then, Grandma says, "Vámonos, mijo. This is our stop." So the subway has stopped. It's time for them to get off. And Julian's even imagining these mermaids are saying goodbye on the subway. So he and his abuela, I guess, are going home or wherever they're going, and they're seeing kids playing in the street. And he says, "Abuela, did you see the mermaids?" She says, "I saw them, mijo." "Abuela, I am also a mermaid." And, so Julian's thinking he's going to be a mermaid. Abuela says, "I'm going to take a bath. You be good." Julian has a good idea. So while Abuela's in the bath, he starts grabbing things from around the house. It looks like he's going to become a mermaid. He's got a plant for his headdress now on his head, and he sees a curtain that looks like it can become a great mermaid tail. And then it's kind of like, I guess Abuela is done. So he says, So I wonder if Julian's thinking, maybe he didn't do something so right? He's kind of become a mermaid. Is that something you can do? And he's kind of looking around, looking at himself, kind of wondering, what's Abuela going to think? But she says, "Come here, mijo." And she's handing him a really beautiful necklace. And she looks a lot like the fish in his imagination. She's wearing a similar dress. And he says, "For me, Abuela?" She says, "For you, Julian." And it looks like they're going to go somewhere. Just how he's all dressed up, just like he became a mermaid. And she's got her umbrella to go out in the sun, and they're going to go somewhere. He says, "Where are we going?" She says, "You'll see," says Abuela. "Mermaids," whispers Julian, "wherever they've gone." He's like, "Abuela, look, there's mermaids. There's all kinds of mermaids." She says, "Like you, mijo, let's join them." So it's a whole parade of mermaids. And they join in with all kinds of mermaids. And it looks like they're headed to the beach. The end. And with that, I'm going down to teach, and I'm going to take all you guys with me, right? We're going down to the basement. Okay.
reading this morning is The Facts of Life by Padraig Otuma. The facts of life: that you were born and you will die, that you will sometimes love enough and sometimes not, that you will lie, if only to yourself, that you will get tired, that you will learn most from the situations you did not choose, that there will be some things that move you more than you can say, that you will live, that you must be loved, that you will avoid questions most urgently in need of your attention, that you began as the fusion of a sperm and an egg of two people who once were strangers and may well still be, that life isn't fair, that life is sometimes good and sometimes better than good, that life is often not so good, that life is real, and if you can survive it well, with love and art and meaning given where meaning's scarce, that you will learn to live with regret, that you will learn to live with respect, that the structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricting, and that you will probably be okay, that you must accept change before you die, but you will die anyway. So you might as well live, and you might as well love. You might as well love. You might as well love.
Thank you, Lisa. So it's been a little more than a decade since I signed the membership book at my home congregation in Columbia, Maryland. And this summer will mark the 10-year anniversary of my first OWL training. If you hang around in Unitarian Universalist spaces for long, you'll likely hear about OWL. For instance, you're hearing about it right now, which stands for Our Whole Lives, a lifespan curriculum encompassing human relationality and sexuality at every stage of life. There are OWL classes for people ranging from kindergarten age through to older adults. Our Whole Lives was jointly developed by the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ in response to two very real needs: the need for comprehensive sex education and the need for sexual health and sexual wholeness to be a part of the sacred work of our faith. I remember very distinctly when the director of religious education at my home congregation approached me to ask if I'd like to train to teach OWL. Great, I said. I was very eager to become involved. What's OWL? And she told me, and I couldn't stop grinning. Of course I will, I told her, because OWL sounded exactly like something that I had needed when I was young. I was trained in the elementary school levels of OWL and was soon partnered with an excellent friend and collaborator to teach our congregation's first ever K1 OWL class. It was a delightful jumbled adventure each week, with me keeping us on book and my co-teacher in charge of general chaos wrangling. Now, since it was the first time we ever offered OWL for kids that young, at the parent orientation session, there were lots of questions. What exactly does sex education mean for 5- and 6-year-olds? We were happy to explain that the early elementary curriculum covers things like the many different ways that families can be made, safety, consent, and proper biological names for body parts and functions. Our first set of parents bravely signed their children up. We started teaching and we waited for feedback. One week, a mother with 2 children in the class came to share a story with me. She had always been on board with OWL because she was a doctor and she knew that her kids would get accurate information shared compassionately and lovingly. She told me, last week, the kids were playing with Matchbox cars and they were racing them, and her daughter was very proud of her winning car. She triumphantly showed it to her mother and said, "My car's name is the Vulva 3000. And as she told me the story, we laughed because of course we did. But I also said in that moment, I guess it's working, because I didn't know that word until much later in my life. And she agreed. It's a funny story. I know there are people in here who actually already heard it. I've shared it often. But to me, the most impressive thing isn't just that her daughter thought of a kick-ass name for her Matchbox car. It's that she learned that word as a fact of life. Not a thing to giggle about or to be ashamed of, and of course, not a dirty word. And that's at the heart of the Our Whole Lives curriculum, and that's why it's a part of religious education, although the curriculum is also used by a number of secular institutions. Some of you were fortunate enough to grow up in Unitarian Universalist spaces, and maybe you went through OWL classes or the precursor, AYS, about your sexuality. Maybe you, like me, grew up in a religious tradition that gave you some very strange messages about your own body and your own sexuality. Maybe you grew up confused about certain aspects of your body and your sexuality because you weren't sure who to trust with your questions, or because you had received messages, both explicit and implicit, that these questions were things to be ashamed of, that your own body or your own sexuality were things to be ashamed of. My Catholic faith put human sexuality in a very constricting box, and honestly, for me, it became something to be afraid of. In the faith of my youth, we would never have read a story like Julian's. In the faith of my youth, we would never have opened with a prayer that sounded like today's chalice lighting. Again, the ending lines of that reading, your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. Holiness and integrity. Both of these words, at their separate etymological roots, refer to wholeness, to unbrokenness. You are whole and welcome here is the refrain of our opening prayer and is one of the great aspirations of Unitarian Universalism. Brené Brown, renowned social science researcher and TED talker, says that integrity is choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy. And it's practicing your values, not just professing them. Starting with something as simple on the surface as teaching children the correct names for parts of their body, we encourage all to be able to name those parts which make up their whole, to develop knowledge of and comfort with those parts so that they can grow into the fullness of their bodies with a deep and a whole understanding. When we understand the sanctity of our bodies, we learn to recognize it in the bodies of others. When we recognize the sanctity of our own bodies, we learn to care for them, learn about what they best need to stay healthy, and to bring us delight. Delight is not something I personally heard a lot about in church when I was younger either. It was certainly not present in conversations about my own body. And yet, if we cannot delight in our bodies, in what they can do and where they can take us, the ways that they bring us information and sensation, knowledge and pleasure, if we cannot inhabit our bodies this way, what is the alternative? Shame, doubt, fear. Will we ever feel the strength of the courage of our convictions? Will we ever feel ready to live with integrity, to trust our bodies with the knowledge and embodiment of our highest values if we are filled with shame, doubt, and fear about the appearance of our bodies or the way our bodies align with or differ from external perceptions, or the way our bodies move and change with time, or the ways our bodies move and change in relation with and to to people whom we give loving and enthusiastic consent. If those things are fraught and weighted with shame and doubt and fear, then we disconnect from our sense of wholeness and holiness. That's a lot different than what we called the facts of life when I was small. And so we'll return our attention to today's reading, Padraig Ó Tuama's The Facts of Life. That life is real, and if you can survive it, well, survive it well, with love and art and meaning given where meaning's scarce. That you will learn to live with regret. That you will learn to live with respect. That the structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricting. That you will probably be okay. That you must accept change before you die, but you will die anyway. So you might as well live, and you might as well love. You might as well love. You might as well love. The structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricting. You will learn to live with regret. You will learn to live with respect. The facts of life, and the facts of love, and the facts of sex, and the facts of being embodied in a mortal body that will die are so much more than we colloquially use that phrase to refer to. If the facts of life are simply a hurried and hushed recitation of the incoming struggle of puberty, just a way to quickly rush through the complexity of that sperm meeting that egg that led to you, well, what does that say about the richness of life? Not much. Our faith calls us to grow whole and holy humans, to reinforce wholeness and holiness within ourselves and others, because the facts of life are so much more than a biology lesson. Because the facts of life shape us along the way, help us to make choices for ourselves, help us to respect the boundaries that others set and to set our own boundaries, to gain a sense of self that is not diminished with the changes that time brings to all bodies. Our faith also calls us to heal the wounds that have been wrought by other spaces, ideas, and people that did harm, whether intentional or not, by rejecting some part of who we are. Our faith calls us into learning and loving more than we think is possible, to honor the wholeness and holiness of ourselves, of others, even of the ones who did harm. It is not easy or fast to live our values or to heal the wounds that would seem to mar our wholeness. But beloveds, those wounds don't remove your wholeness, they add to it. They add to the sum of who you are. It is not fast or easy to learn to love the whole person, whether ourselves or another. The facts of life aren't about being easy. They're about being real. That life is real. And if you can survive it well, with love and art and meaning given where meaning's scarce. In weekly worship, we turn our attention to that which is of highest worth. Human wholeness, human holiness, human thriving for all, regardless of age, sex, gender expression, ability, sexual or affectional preference, marital status, race, ethnicity. What could be worthier? In a world where we continually witness the negation of the other, gun violence, legal rejection of the bodies of our beloved transgender siblings and selves, wanton disregard for the bodies of our Black siblings and selves, inequity in access to health care, housing, and education and nutrition for far, far too many, the act of revisiting and rededicating ourselves to this human wholeness and holiness is the most sacred work. In a world that wants to dehumanize your neighbors, know the beauty of all that it is to be human. That is what our whole lives teaches and preaches. That life is real. And if you can survive it well with love, with art, and meaning given where meaning's scarce. This is the holy act of making meaning together. This is the holy act of celebrating the wholeness of who we are. So may it ever be. Come to the end of another worship service. As we say in my home congregation office, our worship has ended, our service begins. And this week I ask that as you go forth to serve in the world and to put your focus whenever possible on that which is of highest worth to you, when you feel centered in your own sanctity, remember to look at all those around you as holy and whole. So may it be.
Ready? Here we go. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know? is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world